This is a scheme, this migration of birds, including these hummingbirds, that plays itself out every year. And for the most part, I think the general public, it probably goes unnoticed. You know, it's just birds passing through the area, wave after wave after wave. This action of migration is not something that they do by choice. They don't just decide, well, why don't we go south for the winter? These birds are literally answering a call that they can't resist. This is something, they've inherited this genetic material from successful ancestors, and that message is encoded in their genes. It tells them if you're going to survive and if you're going to be here to breed next year, it's imperative that you leave at this time headed into the tropics. And that call they're going to respond to. It is who they are, it is what they do, and they're going to migrate. These tiny bands that we put on hummingbirds, like ruby-throated hummingbirds, it takes 5,500 of those bands to weigh 1 ounce. So they're very, very tiny. We use a special tool for installing them, and this is a banding plier. It's custom made just for this process. These birds are always healthy this time of year. These birds are migrating, getting rather fat. These birds are capable of doubling their weight in as little as 7 to 10 days, and that process is well underway already. We'll catch a general mix of birds, everything from immature birds to adult birds that have completed the breeding. We secure them in a toe of a nylon stocking. That's Martha's adaptation, but it allows us to safely handle the birds, keeps us from hurting the birds, and keeps them from hurting themselves. We first check to see if the bird is banded, because we have the possibility of recovering someone else's bird here or a bird that we banded in previous years. And that quickly, this bird is now wearing a numbered band that's exclusive to this bird alone. So whatever natural history this bird would develop through its normal life can now be monitored if it is encountered again. We'll take a series of measurements and we'll call those out. The wing is 44.89 millimeters. The tail is 26.1 millimeter. The weight is 3.43 grams.
Any molt?
We will also check the molt sequence in these birds. We just use a simple soda straw, a drinking straw, to blow back the feathers to examine it for molt. These are all pieces of information that are available to any other researchers that care to study these birds, hummingbirds in general or ruby-throated in particular. That's all the molt I see.
Okay.
As part of our study of these birds, we color mark them. This month we're marking birds at this location white. It allows us to monitor the birds in this yard. This color is supposed to be our color exclusively. So if this bird moves out of this area, headed southward, it can be monitored simply by sight. If it's seen by an observer, and we have a tremendous network of observers, these birds can be, we can track their migration movement. They're quite remarkable. At this location, at our home, we've been banding birds here for about 14 years. Currently, unless we're occupied with training the way we have been this summer, training new banders, we can reasonably expect to capture and band in excess of 800 birds here each season, each summer season. And that begins for us in late March and will end about the first week in October. This bird, a rather fat and robust creature, I'm going to rotate it a little bit where you can see the iridescent feathers of the throat that characterizes an adult male ruby-throated. They really are quite spectacular. These feathers in the gorget, or gorget, G-O-R-G-E-T, are used both as an aggressive type implement, a tool, to try to frighten away any intruders into this bird's territory, male birds, or it's used to attract a female. We refer to him as the original flasher. Hard to imagine that this tiny bird that we've got in our hand, 4.35, that this bird could have hatched in Canada, could have hatched here, or anywhere in between. This species has a huge nesting area, breeding area. A little bit broad in the middle. It has about a 1+ fat. In the case of the females, only on the belly, in the gorget. The females, when they come out of a nest, have stored in that tiny brain all the information that tells them how to construct a nest. If you can imagine, all that's there. I mean, when they're born, it's there. This one's really heavy and ready to go.
Salvia gorenetica is one of the best plants you can put in your garden to attract hummingbirds. It starts blooming in the early spring, it'll recycle, and then it'll bloom again in the fall for the southward migration. It's also called anise sage, and it is a perennial, so you only have to plant it one time. It does require a lot of space, and it spreads on its own. So once you get a good start of it, that's all you have to do. Is just every once in a while throw it a little bit of fertilizer and make sure you water it, and it'll come back year after year after year.
It is difficult to imagine that they start out, this hatching ear male bird we have here, as an egg the size of a black-eyed pea or slightly smaller. That's not an uncommon something. The mother bird will lay one egg, and then 2 or 3 days later she'll lay the second egg. So there's a great deal of difference in the size of these birds. They don't hatch on the same day. The top of this nest, I'm going to release this bird, it's banded. But the top of this nest is very soft and pliable, very flexible. It stretches almost like spandex. So when the babies leave the nest, they weigh almost twice as much as the mother bird weighs at that time. So the top of this nest, to accommodate 2 big baby birds, will stretch dramatically, and you can see with my fingers how pliable it is. It just opens up. But it needs to be expandable when it's got these 2 huge babies in it. But that weight difference, even though they're that large early on, that weight difference is soon balanced out. These birds have poor flying skills when they first hatch. They don't have the experience at foraging and catching bugs on the wing. So that extra fat that they're carrying serves them well. They can eat off of that fat, if you will, live off of that until their skill levels get up as flying birds. And those that don't have it won't make it to be here next year.
This is cardinal flower. You see it growing in the wild, and this is one of the things that the hummingbirds would feed on when they're migrating back south. It's in damp areas, and once you see a patch of this, if you'll just sit and watch it, you'll be amazed at how many hummingbirds actually feed on this flower. We don't think it has a lot of nectar, but it attracts a lot of soft-bodied insects that the hummingbirds have to have for the muscle and tissue in their bodies.
The primary food for these birds is probably insects, always. I think we have maybe mischaracterized hummingbirds as nectivores. Not everybody feels this way, so this is my opinion, okay? Mine and Martha's opinion. But these birds spend much of their time actually catching insects, and when they don't have a feeder, they consistently glean the bark of trees, the undersides of evergreen type trees, conifers in the boughs of conifers, the ends of the limbs for insects, and they also feed from sapsucker wells.
Lantana is an old-fashioned shrub you may want to put in your garden. It's a big woody plant. It has a lot of little tubular-shaped flowers that attract lots of hummingbirds. But the bonus with the lantana is It attracts butterflies also. Another thing, when the berries turn dark black, dark blue and black, the songbirds, the migrating songbirds, feed on it also.
The aggressiveness in these birds that we're seeing today, these ruby-throated hummingbirds, is probably a product of the hormonal changes that occur during the breeding season. For a ruby-throated hummingbird, the most aggressive males will be the one that will be able to dominate a breeding territory. They will try to evict, chase away, if you will, any other male challengers to that territory, and they will attempt to breed with any females that come into that same breeding territory. So the birds that their genes wind up in the gene pool are the mean birds, the most aggressive that we all see at our feeders. And the same holds true for the females. The most aggressive of the female birds will be those birds that can dominate the area around the nest. In other words, she can fend for herself and her babies. She can feed herself while she's incubating, and feed the babies after they hatch.
We think that this actually started because some of these birds had a defective gene. Instead of a south migrating gene, they had an east migrating gene. It was a defect. And many of these birds survived because in the case of rufous, they're very cold hardy. So these birds that survived came back and they go back year after year. For a long time, there probably was not enough of those birds in the population to make any valid difference in the total numbers of eastward migrating genes. But in the case of rufous hummingbird, we think they have crossed a threshold, and now we have males with this gene finding females with this gene and mating, and all their offspring are now North American birds. These are birds that no longer go down into the tropics, and we can prove that and have proved that in our study of these birds. They spend their whole lifetime in North America, in the US and Canada. They go that far north, and Alaska, they go that far. But now we have a population of rufous hummingbirds, unlike their counterparts. I won't call them another race or a subspecies, but in time I think that that will be the case because they're an isolated population. We operate a banding station at Fort Morgan, Alabama that's open to the public. We are partners in education with the local school systems there, so your membership dues or purchases go to support that work. It may in fact be the most important work that we do is the educational part with the children as opposed to the banding of the birds.
But that we are willing to impose that risk. Good morning. Yeah, did you hear it? Isn't it pretty? This little bird has got a white eye. That's where it gets its name, white-eyed vireo, because it has a white eye. But it's got a sharp bill. It's got a really sharp bill. If you look closely, you can see it. See how sharp it is? It uses it to catch bugs with. And that's what that bill does. But it's really noisy. He's very noisy. You're right, he is very, very noisy.
There's a snake in the garbage in the bed.
A snake? Huh? In the garbage? See the band?
That's a little.
It's like a bracelet. And it'll wear that all its life. And it has a series of numbers on that no other bird will ever have. It's got 9 numbers on it, and no other bird will ever have that combination of numbers. So if this bird is captured by someone else, or if it were to fly into a window or get hit by a car, if that number is reported, we can track, in some instances, how old these birds live to be. Because we ban these birds as immature birds, and in many instances, they're captured 8 or 9 years later. And in some instances, those birds, we had no idea they lived that long. So we have a great tool, if you will, in banding to establish longevity. And we can also determine where these birds travel. The birds that come on shore here, we can get some feel for where these birds actually are going to nest because we can record their occurrences. We can really learn a lot through the banding process.
Did you find her?
Would you like to release this bird?
Oh, I'd love to.
Okay. Thought I'd never ask. Right?
That's right.
Just reach up under my hand like so. Close your fingers gently and hold your other hand underneath, okay? See, this is for children of all ages. I'm eternally 12 years old. Just open your right hand and let it fly.
He didn't realize it was set free.
It's always such a joy to come out here first thing and watch it get daylight. It's a beautiful eastern wood pewee flycatcher. I think we caught more of the species yesterday than we've ever captured. They really are in the area. You can hear them calling in the background. Beautiful. These birds nest in the eastern U.S. and can be found all the way down into South America in the winter, and that's where these birds are headed. This is a common yellowthroat. One of the birds that's really widely distributed, and a part of the population of this bird will actually spend the winter here. Some will go down into the tropics. But they're tiny, very pugnacious, very aggressive. Don't have much in the way of tools to back that up, but they're just beautiful birds. They seem to have a lot of spunk.
The original silk nets to capture birds were made by the Chinese. I mean, it's their system. But it's very, very effective. This is a really great tool to study birds because you can interrupt their lives only briefly to do these things that we do here and share with you guys, in the case of the children in particular. And then we release them and it doesn't hurt them in any fashion. And this particular site at Fort Morgan is a very special site to do this because we have so many birds that pass through here going southward into the tropics each fall. And then in the springtime, particularly in March and April, we have all these birds that are doing the reverse. They're headed northward to the breeding areas. And they come through and we sample these birds by capturing and banding them and weighing and measuring and seeing what species and what age and general condition and all that. We do that each April for 2 weeks and each October for 2 weeks. This is an all-volunteer operation you guys are seeing here. But we're delighted to have you here as visitors, and if your children or grandchildren, you want to bring them, they're always welcome here, okay? If you will, we'll go back to the tent and watch them band some more birds.
Helps you to notice too if there's any.
Our normal bander training system here normally involves about a 4-year period of apprentice going through the program. And they learn all phases of it, including the record keeping, not just getting birds out of the net. Our philosophy is if you got in there, you can be gotten out. So it just takes patience sometimes. It takes patience all the time, actually.
Yeah.
Isn't that a huge piece of plunder? These are the ones that test your patience. Beautiful. Ruby crowned kinglet. If these birds had low body weights, we wouldn't do this. We'd just release them. But these birds are healthy this morning. And any time that you can get the public involved to the degree that they realize that these birds are alive and warm and they have a heart that beats and you can feel their temperature and all that, then we think that we affect the public. They get to caring about the birds, and if they care about the birds, they care about the habitat of these birds. And they become better voters, really. They care. They go to town meetings and that sort of thing. So there's a little trickery involved in what we do. Would you like to release it?
Okay. Yes.
Normally with the children, I say, "Can you say yes, sir?"
Yes, sir.
Just run your hand. Just run your hand up under mine, like this, going right in your finger.
Okay.
There you go. Just gently, and then just open your hand and raise your hand up. We don't pull his tail feathers. Just raise it up. Wonderful. These birds don't recognize our boundaries that we've drawn.
as civilized, so-called civilized people. We mark boundaries with rivers and lines in the dirt that say, you know, this is the U.S. and this is Canada and this is Alaska and this is Mexico. But that don't mean spit to the birds, okay? It just does not mean anything to them. They were here before we were, and all of the Americas is their home. They just winter in the south of here, and they come north to raise their babies. But they don't know these silly lines that we've drawn on maps. So they have no voice of their own. If they have a voice, it's from the guys that come here. It's from you, it's from us. If they're going to be protected and they're going to be preserved for all times, then we are their protectors. Or we are the ones that neglect them, and they will pass away. And many of these very special birds that we have here, these neotropical migrant birds, are literally going by the boards. I mean, a lot of these are disappearing at a rapid rate. We're just learning how to monitor birds. We are constantly revising the system for monitoring their populations and general health. But the truth is we don't know very much. We are part of that effort here, just a tiny part with our bird banding operation. But we don't know much. I hope we find out in time to save them. When I built my house here on this 10 acres of land, I think I cut down like maybe 60 something trees here, cleared out for this house, and I had to cut a number of other trees to put a road in. And it was all right to do that. That was 30 years ago. It was all right to do that because this was my land, this was going to be my house. I could do with this property like I wanted to do. There was lots of land around here for the birds. It didn't really matter all that much. But the day I completed this house and quit cutting down trees, I became very resentful of those around that wanted to do the same thing I done. It was all right to cut the trees until I got mine built, but it wasn't all right after that. And that is the problem. I mean, we are all the problem. Like at Fort Morgan, we talk about, and this is something Martha and I talk about a lot. Used to, when we'd get up there before dawn, you could walk outside, you could walk the peninsula, walk the fort in the pre-dawn hours. Not a sound. Maybe you'd hear a foghorn way in the distance. You might hear a bell on a ship coming into the Mobile Bay, but that would be all. No sounds, just the night sounds. And now you get up, it's really just all kinds of noises. You can stand on the deck where we are the deck of our house where we stay when we're banding, and you can probably see several dozen oil and gas rigs just from where we are, and you can hear many more. I hate the sight, I hate the sounds of these oil rigs off the coast. I mean, I really do hate it. But I might turn right around, be out on the deck looking at all this and complaining, turn right around and go inside the house where we're staying and turn on that gas stove to make coffee and cook breakfast. And I love it when that gas pops up and I can just put the coffee on to make coffee. And that gas comes from right offshore probably. So again, we are part of the problem, all of us. Even if we work in the conservation movement, we're still a part of the problem. This is a wood thrush. Isn't it pretty? We're going to try to preach conservation, and we do, but we're still going to be consumers. Doesn't mean we're bad people. It doesn't mean the other umpteen million people that do this are bad people. But low on the totem pole in this is the wildlife, the preservations of the land that they require, they've always required, and that's slipping away really fast. I mean, that's really slipping fast. I don't know what the answer is. We just, we'll all continue to do the best we can, contribute in that fashion if we have something to contribute, you know, whatever kind of conservation movement we can get in. Support the acquisition of lands. That's critical because they're not making any more land. Try to be intelligent, well-informed voters. Try to ask hard questions of the people that we're going to vote for. Make them make a commitment as to what they're going to stand for once they're in office. Are you going to try to help us preserve lands, or are you going to defend the right of individuals as opposed to just supporting constant development? I'm not real sure what the answer is. We just do the best we can is all I know.
She went to school out in Idaho to learn to be a bird bander. And then she worked with us for 4 years before they even give her a sub permit.
Videotape copies of this program may be purchased by calling 1-800-463-8825. To learn more about programs from the Alabama Experience series on the World Wide Web, visit www.alabamatv.org.